Welcome back to TechWolf and to this CompTIA A Core 1 practice test. And here on Skill Test Pro, if you are interested, you can go and do these practice tests for yourself. Or I also have a Udemy course for CompTIA A Core 1 and Core 2 questions, where I have 1200 questions. I will leave all links in description. If you are interested, go and check this out. But now, no further ado, let's get into it. And first question is, a company needs to install network cabling that is resistant to electrical interference. Which type should they use? Fiber optic, unshielded twisted pair, flat Ethernet, coaxial, or category 5. And here we are looking for cabling that is resistant to electrical interference. And here the correct answer is obviously fiber optic, as fiber optic cables are immune to electromagnetic interference, making them ideal for high interference environments. However, here you should also know that fiber optic you wouldn't install in local internet or local area networks, as local area networks, for example, for connecting devices or workstations, you would use some shielded twisted pair or STP cables, which are CAT cables. So you wouldn't use fiber optic. And next one. A user reports that their internet is slow even though they have a fast connection. What network settings might be limiting their speed? Firewall rules, screen brightness, keyboard layout, QoS settings or quality of service settings, or printer driver. And here the correct answer is QoS settings or quality of service settings, as misconfigured QoS or quality of service settings can limit network speed by prioritizing certain types of traffic. As you know guys, we use QoS or quality of service in networking to prioritize traffic. And that's why if QoS would be misconfigured or would be configured to prioritize some other traffic, for example VoIP over like web traffic, that would be limiting internet speed for one or other traffic. A technician is configuring a new Soho router. What settings should they adjust to prevent unauthorized remote access? Disable remote management, increase Wi-Fi power output, lower the screen brightness, disable USB ports, or change the monitor refresh rate. And here the correct answer would be disable remote management, as disabling remote management prevents unauthorized external access to the router's settings. A technician needs to connect two switches without using a router. What type of Ethernet cable should they use? For example, if you would want to connect two switches together and would not want to use a router, what cable you should use? Straight through cable, crossover cable, coaxial cable, shielded twisted pair, or fiber optic cable. And here you should know what type of cable you would use for the same devices, as there are two types of connections. One is if you are connecting different types of devices, for example switch to router, and another one you would use if you are connecting the same type of devices, for example switch to switch or router to router, then you would use another cable. And here, as we are connecting two switches which are the same two devices, we would use a crossover cable. If we would be connecting switch to a router, we would be using a straight through cable. And crossover cables connect similar network devices such as switches without a router. A technician needs to ensure the fastest wireless connection for streaming 4K video. Actually, a technician needs to ensure the fastest wireless connection for streaming 4K video. What Wi-Fi standard should they use? And you should also know for CompTIA A Core 1 Wi-Fi standards. So which standard of Wi-Fi the technician would use to ensure the fastest wireless connection or Wi-Fi connection for streaming 4K videos. 802.11n, 802.11g, 802.11ax, 802.11a or 802.11b. And here the correct answer is 802.11ax, as this is the latest standard actually. As 802.11ax Wi-Fi 6 provides higher speeds, lower latency and better efficiency for high bandwidth applications. A company wants to segment different departments on the same network for security reasons. What features should they use? QoS, DHCP, VLAN, VPA2 or port forwarding, which would be the correct answer here. And here the correct answer would be VLAN, as virtual local area networks or VLANs separate network traffic into different segments for better security and management. A technician is troubleshooting a slow Ethernet connection. The network switch supports gigabit speeds, but the user's connection is limited to 100 megabits per second. What is the most likely issue? So we are looking what is the most likely issue if the user's connection is limited to 100 megabits per second only. However, a technician is troubleshooting slow Ethernet connection. However, the network switch supports gigabit speeds. A weak Wi-Fi signal, a slow GPU, a faulty sound driver, a defective printer cable, or using a Cat5 cable instead of a Cat5e or higher. And here, logically, if switch supports gigabit speeds and user is limited only to 100 megabits per second, you should know that it is the problem with using Cat5 cable, as Cat5 cables do not support gigabit speeds where Cat5e and higher do. A technician is setting up a home router. Which wireless security protocol should be avoided due to vulnerabilities? Now we are looking for wireless or Wi-Fi security protocol that should be avoided due to vulnerabilities. So which is the bad Wi-Fi protocol? WEP or WEP, VPA3 or WPA3, WPA2, AES or TKIP. And here you should know the weakest Wi-Fi or very first Wi-Fi protocol which was created, which is WEP, as WEP is outdated and easily cracked, making it insecure for modern networks. A technician needs to test the speed of a wired network connection. What command should they use in Windows? Speed test, ping, ipconfig, netstat or traceRT. So to test the speed of a wired network connection, we would use a speed test, as speed test tools measure network speed including download and upload rates. A network administrator needs to extend a high-speed Ethernet connection beyond 100 meters. What is the best solution? So, if you want a high-speed internet and if you want to create this connection which is longer than 100 meters, what is the best solution to use here? Fiber optic cable, Cat7 cable, wireless bridge, coaxial cable or flat Ethernet cable. And here the correct answer is fiber optic cable, as fiber optic cables can support high-speed connection over long distances without a signal degradation. A technician is configuring a router and wants to prevent specific devices from accessing the network. What should they enable? So, a technician is configuring a router and the purpose is that he wants to prevent specific devices from accessing the network. So what should they enable? Quality of service settings, MAC filtering, port forwarding, DHCP reservation, or Wi-Fi 6. And here the correct answer is MAC filtering, as MAC filtering allows the administrator to specify which devices can connect to the network. A technician is installing an access point that supports Wi-Fi 6. Which frequency bands will it operate on? And you should know it by knowing Wi-Fi 6. 5 GHz only, 2.4 GHz only, 2.4 GHz, 5 GHz, and 6 GHz, 1.8 GHz and 3 GHz, or 900 MHz and 1.2 GHz. And here the correct answer, if it is a Wi-Fi 6, which is already a X standard, then it would support all these frequencies 2.4, 5 and 6 GHz, as Wi-Fi 6E operates on all three frequency bands, including the newly introduced 6 GHz band as well. And what type of a connector is used for standard Ethernet cables? So, for Ethernet cables, that is the most popular connector which we are using. RJ11, RJ45, USB-C, BNC, or SC. And here the correct answer is RJ45, as RJ45 connectors are used for Ethernet networking. A user complains about frequent network drops when using an Ethernet cable. What is the most likely cause? A slow monitor refresh rate, a weak Wi-Fi signal, an outdated sound driver, a low battery in the laptop, or a damaged cable. And here the correct answer is damaged cable, as a faulty or damaged Ethernet cable can cause intermittent network disconnections. A technician is setting up a gigabit Ethernet connection. What is the minimum category of cable required? So here we are looking for a cable which is the minimum category of cables that supports gigabit Ethernet connection. Cat5e, Cat3, Cat5, Cat6a, or Cat7. And minimum is Cat5e, as Cat5e supports gigabit Ethernet 1 gigabit per second over standard Ethernet distances. What is the maximum length of a standard Ethernet cable before signal degradation occurs? So here the keyword is standard Ethernet cable. 50 meters, 100 meters, 200 meters, 75 meters, or 500 meters. And standard for almost all of them is 100 meters. However, we would never use a cable in one length of 100 meters. That would usually be about 60-70 meters in real life scenarios. So the maximum length of an Ethernet cable is 100 meters or 328 feet before requiring a repeater. A company wants to future-proof its network with the highest possible wired speed. Which cable category should they install? Cat5e, Cat6, Cat8, Cat7, or Cat3. As you can see, Cat3 we are not even using. If you have been studying cables. And here the correct answer is Cat8, as Cat8 supports up to 40 gigabits per second and is designed for high performance networking. Which Ethernet cable category is required to support 10 gigabits per second speeds at distances up to 55 meters? Cat6, Cat5e, Cat3, Cat5, or Cat6a. And here the correct answer is Cat6, as Cat6a already can support up to 100 meters, as Cat6 Cat6 supports 10 gigabits per second speeds, but only up to 55 meters, while Cat6a extends this up to 100 meters. A technician is troubleshooting a network issue and suspects a damaged Ethernet cable. What tool should they use? So, if you want to check a damaged Ethernet cable, what tool should you use as a technician? Multimeter, cable tester, power supply tester, screwdriver, or heat gun? And here the correct answer is cable tester, as a cable tester verifies connectivity and checks for issues such as broken wires or bad crimps. And crimps mean that the connection, RJ5 connector, is badly crimped to the wire itself or to the cable itself. A technician needs to run an Ethernet cable for a new office workstation. Which cable type would be best for minimizing interference in an industrial environment? UTP, or unshielded twisted pair, coaxial, fiber optic, STP or shielded twisted pair, or flat Ethernet? And here I already gave you kind of a correct answer at the start of this video. If it is about office workstation, about office environment, not about connecting like network, that would be shielded twisted pair CAT cable or STP cable, as STP cables reduce electromagnetic interference, making them ideal for industrial environments, and not only, even in office environments. For example, if there is some interference, you could use also STP or shielded twisted pair cables. A technician is setting up a new laptop for a remote worker who needs secure access to the company's network. The company uses a VPN with multi-factor authentication or MFA. Which steps should the technician take to configure the laptop for secure VPN access? Install the VPN client and configure MFA with a mobile app. Enable BitLocker encryption and join the laptop to the domain. Configure the firewall to allow only VPN traffic. Set up a static IP address for the VPN connection. Or install an antivirus suite with VPN integration. Which one would be the correct answer here? And here the correct answer is install the VPN client and configure MFA or multi-factor authentication with a mobile app. So, secure VPN access requires installing the company's VPN client and configuring MFA, typically using a mobile app for authentication tokens. This ensures secure, authenticated access to the network. This aligns with objective, this is the CompTIA Core 1 objective for CompTIA 1201 exam, which covers configuring remote access solutions. A user reports that their desktop PC's USB ports stop working intermittently. The technician observes that the issue occurs when multiple USB devices are connected, and rebooting temporarily resolves it. Device Manager shows no errors. What is the most likely cause of the issue? Outdated USB controller drivers, a loose USB port connection on the motherboard, overheating of the USB controller chip, corrupted Windows USB registry entries, or insufficient power from the PSU or power supply unit to the USB hub. And the correct answer here is insufficient power from the PSU to the USB hub, as intermittent USB port failures when multiple devices are connected suggest the PSU or power supply unit cannot supply enough power to the USB hub, especially under load. Rebooting may temporarily reset our application. A technician is upgrading a workstation's storage to support a database application requiring fast read-write speeds. The budget allows for a single drive and data redundancy is not required. Which storage type should the technician select? 2.5-inch SATA SSD, M.2 NVMe SSD, 3.5-inch HDD, hybrid SSH, and here the correct answer is M.2 NVMe SSD, as M.2 NVMe SSD provides the fastest read-write speeds via PCIe, ideal for database applications requiring high performance. They are reliable due to no moving parts, like with HDDs or hard disk drives, fitting the budget for a single drive. A technician is configuring a SOHO or small office, home office network with a wireless access point VAP to support IoT or Internet of Things devices on a separate SSID. The IoT devices use the 2.4 GHz band and require a specific channel to avoid interference. Which configuration should the technician implement on the VAP or VAP? Enable 5 GHz for IoT devices and disable 2.4 GHz. Configure the VAP or VAP to use VPA3 personal security. Set the 2.4 GHz band to channel 6 with a unique SSID. Set the VAP to auto channel selection for both bands. Or enable MU, multi-user, MIMO, multiple input, multiple output for IoT device performance. And here the correct answer is set the 2.4 GHz band to channel 6 with a unique SSID, as IoT devices often require the 2.4 GHz band and specific channel AG6 to avoid interference. A unique SSID isolate IoT devices for security management, and this is usually done to separate the IoT devices from the internet which you are using locally. And next question, a user's tablet is overheating when running a resource-intensive app. The technician confirms the device is updated and no other apps are running. The tablet is used in a warm environment and the case is non-ventilated. What should the technician recommend to mitigate the overheating? Remove the tablet case to improve airflow. Reduce the app's graphics settings. Enable airplane mode to reduce heat. Replace the battery to prevent thermal issues. Or install a third-party cooling app. And here the correct answer is remove the tablet case to improve airflow, as a non-ventilated case traps heat, exacerbating overheating in warm environments. Removing the case improves airflow, helping dissipate heat from the tablet's components. A technician is troubleshooting a printer that produces faded prints even after replacing the toner cartridge. The printer is laser model, so this is the laser printer, and the issue persists across multiple print jobs. What should the technician check next to resolve the issue? Clean the fuser assembly, replace the imaging drum, adjust the print density settings, update the printer's firmware, or check the transfer roller for wear. So you should also know the printer or especially laser printer troubleshooting and what should you do and what are different causes. And in this scenario we have faded prints, and if we have faded prints then we have to check the transfer roller for wear, as faded prints in a laser printer despite a new toner cartridge often indicate a worn transfer roller which fails to properly transfer toner to the paper. A company is deploying a virtual machine or VM on a technician's workstation for software testing. The VM requires 16 GB of RAM and 4 CPU cores, but the workstation has only 8 GB of RAM and a dual-core CPU. What should the technician do to ensure the VM runs effectively? Increase the workstation's RAM to 32 GB and upgrade to a quad-core CPU. Allocate 4 GB of RAM and 2 CPU cores to the VM. enable hyper-threading to simulate 4 CPU cores, use a cloud-based VM service instead of the local workstation, install faster SSD to improve VM performance or virtual machine performance. So what would be the correct answer here? And the correct answer here is increase the workstation RAM to 32 GB and upgrade to a quad-core CPU, as the VM's requirement 16 GB RAM for CPU cores exceeds the workstation's capacity, and 8 GB RAM dual core CPU. Upgrading the hardware to meet or exceed these requirements ensures the VM runs effectively without compromising. A technician is installing a new motherboard in desktop PC. So we are installing a motherboard in a desktop PC. After connecting all components, the system powers on, but there is no display and no post beep codes are heard. The technician verifies the CPU, RAM and GPU are compatible and seated correctly. What is the most likely cause of the issue? The motherboard CMOS battery is dead. We know that CMOS has nothing to do with display. A RAM is installed in the wrong slots. The GPU requires a firmware update. The power supply's 8-pin CPU connector is not plugged in. And the monitor is set to the wrong input source. Which one would be the correct answer here? And here the correct answer is that the power supply's 8-pin CPU connector is not plugged in, as a missing 8-pin CPU power connector. As you know, there is another CPU or central processing unit power connectors on motherboards, and if it is not plugged in, then it will not be working, can cause the system to power on but fail to post or display output. As the CPU lacks sufficient power, this is a common oversight during motherboard installation. A small office is experiencing slow internet speed on their wired network. The technician confirms the router's WAN or wide area network port is connected to a 1 gigabit per second ISP modem, but the LAN or local area network ports on the router are rated at 100 megabits per second. What should the technician do to improve network performance? Configure QoS to prioritize critical traffic, replace the Ethernet cables with Cat6, upgrade the router to one that supports 1 gigabit per second LAN ports, enable jumbo frame on the router, install a managed switch with VLAN support. And here the correct answer, or most likely, would be upgrade the router to one that supports 1 gigabit per second local area network ports, as the router's 100 megabits per second LAN ports are bottlenecked the 1 gigabit per second internet connection. Upgrading to a router with 1 gigabit per second LAN ports allows the network to utilize the full ISP speed or internet service provider's speed. A technician is setting up a docking station for a user's laptop to connect multiple peripherals, including an external monitor, keyboard and mouse. The laptop uses USB-C for docking, but the monitor fails to display. The technician confirms the docking station is powered and other peripherals work. What should the technician check first to resolve the monitor issue? And actually, guys, these questions which are coming up now here on Skill Test Pro, these are the questions which you will be getting on your real exam, and they look exactly like this, as I have also taken a CompTIA A Core 1 and Core 2. These questions, when I was reading, most of these questions were quite long, And that's why I remember from my taking Core 1 and Core 2 that that was the main timing issue for me to read these questions, understand these questions, because they were similar to this question which you are seeing right now, or which are here now, these latest questions which we are going through or over now, where you are given like real different scenarios and you are given different answers for these scenarios, and you have to think about the scenario, understand this scenario, and when you have only 1 minute for such big question, it is kind of stressing. And I'm just telling you from my experience, maybe someone understands these questions faster, but my experience was that I always had to understand this question as it asks kind of all scenario and then gives the correct answer. However, now while practicing, I have been practicing on passing so many exams just by practicing doing these tests myself, or thousands of these different tests. Usually I do before I take this type of exam, like in Core 1 or network or security, I do at least 1000 practice tests myself, not watching videos, but actually practicing myself, so training myself to read, understand, and be able to do these answers myself in real world scenario, like it will be on exam. Because watching videos like you are doing right now, probably it is very easy when someone is reading and you don't read yourself, you don't put effort into reading and understanding these questions. It's easier when someone else is reading and giving you answers. But in real world scenario, when you have these questions, however, all 90 questions will obviously not be like this, and usually there is not even 90 questions, there's about 75 or 80 questions, but many questions will be this length and answers will be like this on your real exam. However, there will be also quick exam questions like we were reviewing in previous videos and previous these CompTIA tests which we had a look at, where you are tested in short, so CompTIA understands whether you know the subject in general. Let's go through these answers. Verifies the USB-C cable support DisplayPort Alt mode, checks the laptop's display settings for extended mode, updates the docking station's firmware, replace the monitor's HDMI cable with a DisplayPort cable, or ensures the docking station has sufficient power output. And here the correct answer is verifies the USB-C cable supports DisplayPort Alt mode. Many docking stations use USB-C with DisplayPort Alt mode to transmit video. If the monitor isn't displaying, the USB-C cable may not support this mode, preventing video output. A technician is troubleshooting a desktop that fails to connect to a wired network. The Ethernet cable and switch port are confirmed functional, and the NIC's link light is off. Device manager shows no errors for the NIC, and drivers are up to date. What should the technician do next to diagnose the issue? Replace the NIC with a known good one, check the BIOS for onboard NIC settings, perform a loopback test on the NIC, reset the switch to clear any MAC filtering, or reinstall the network drivers. And here the correct answer is check the BIOS for onboarding NIC settings, as if the NIC's link light is off despite of a functional cable on switch, the onboard NIC may be disabled in the BIOS. Checking the BIOS settings verifies if the NIC is enabled before proceeding to hardware replacement or other tests. A technician is configuring a new workstation for a graphic designer requiring a high-performance storage for large files. The budget allows for one storage device and reliability is priority. Which storage configuration should the technician choose? 2 TB HDD with 7200 RPM, 1 TB SATA SSD, 4 TB external USB drive, RAID 0 with two 1 TB hard disk drives, or 512 GB NVMe SSD. And here the correct answer is 512 GB NVMe SSD. NVMe SSD offers superior speed for a large file transfers, critical for Graphic design, while smaller in capacity, reliability is higher than HDDs due to no moving parts, and it meets the budget constraint for one device. A user reports that their tablet cannot send emails, but receiving emails and browsing the web work fine. The technician verifies the emails up SMTP or Simple Mail Transfer Protocol settings, including the correct server and port, but the issue persists. What should the technician check next to resolve the issue? The tablet's firewall settings blocking outbound SMTP traffic, the email provider's server status for SMTP outages, the tablet's storage capacity for email app data, the Wi-Fi signal strength affecting SMTP connections, or the email app's cache for corrupted data or data. And here the correct answer is the tablet's firewall settings blocking outbound SMTP traffic. As if the tablet can receive emails and browse the web, the network and email server are functional. A firewall blocking outbound SMTP traffic, typically port 587 or 465, could prevent sending emails. A technician is diagnosing a laptop with a dim display, even at maximum brightness settings. External monitor outputs work fine and the display cable is securely connected. The technician suspects a hardware issue. What component is most likely causing the problem? Faulty display panel, defective inverter board, malfunctional GPU, corrupted display driver, or loose motherboard connection. And here the correct answer is defective inverter board, as a dim laptop display despite maximum brightness settings often indicates a faulty inverter board, which supplies power to the backlights. Since the external monitor works, the GPU and drivers are unlikely causes. A company is migrating its on-premises file server to a cloud-based solution. The IT team needs to ensure users can access files securely from remote locations using their existing credentials. Which cloud service model and feature should the technician recommend? IaaS with a VPN for secure access, PaaS with multi-factor authentication MFA, private cloud with a dedicated firewall, SaaS with a single sign-on integration, or hybrid cloud with encrypted storage. And here the correct answer is SaaS, or software as a service with a single sign-on integration. A cloud-based file server is typically a software as a service solution, providing a file access via web interface or app. SSO allows users, or single sign-on allows users to authenticate with existing credentials, enhancing security and convenience. A technician is troubleshooting a desktop that randomly shuts down during resource-intensive tasks. The CPU cooler is clean and thermal paste is recently applied. The system logs show no errors, but the technician notices the PSU or power supply unit is rated at 400 watts, while the system includes a high-end CPU and GPU. What is the most likely cause of the shutdowns? Insufficient PSU wattage for the system's components, overheating due to inadequate case ventilation, a faulty CPU throttling under load, corrupted system drivers causing instability, or failing motherboard capacitor. And here the correct answer is insufficient PSU wattage for the system's components, as this is mentioning that it has a high-end CPU and high-end GPU, and as you see there's only 400 watts and minimum For high-end computers or PCs, you would have 650 watt. Would be like bare minimum if you are using high-end CPUs and high-end GPUs. GPU is graphics card or graphics processing unit. Efficient PSU, we need to select this. Random shutdown during intensive tasks suggests the PSU cannot supply enough power to the high-end CPU and GPU exceeding the 400 watt rating. This causes the system to shut down to prevent damage. A small business is setting up SOHO or small office home office network with a router, switch and wireless access point. A technician needs to configure the router to assign IP addresses dynamically to devices while reserving a static IP for network printer. Which configuration should the technician implement? Enable DHCP with reservation for the printer's MAC address. Set the printer to use a manual IP outside the DHCP pool. Configure the router to use a static IP pool for all devices. Disable DHCP and assign static IPs to all devices. Or enable a PIPA for the printer and DHCP for other devices. And here, this is a tricky question. And here the correct answer would be enable a PIPA for the printer and DHCP for other devices. As DHCP dynamically assigns IPs to devices, simplifying management, a DHCP reservation ties the printer's MAC address to a specific IP, ensuring always receives the same address without manual configuration. A technician is upgrading a desktop PC to improve gaming performance. The user wants to install a high-end GPU requiring a 750 watt power supply and PCIe 4.0 support. The current motherboard has PCIe 3.0 by 16 slot and 500 watt PSU. What should the technician recommend to meet the user requirements? Upgrade the PSU to or power supply unit to 750 watt and keep the motherboard. Replace the motherboard with one supporting PCIe 4.0. Add a PCIe 4.0 adapter card to existing motherboard. Use a PSU adapter cable to support the GPU's power needs, or install the GPU and monitor system stability. Which one would be the correct answer here? And here the logical answer is upgrade the PSU or power supply unit to 750 watt and keep the motherboard. As the GPU requires 750 watts PSU so updating the PSU is necessary. PCIe 4.0's GPUs are backward compatible with PCIe 3.0 slots, and this is the catch. Here, this part, if you didn't know it, guys, if you didn't know that this is backward compatible, you wouldn't be able to answer this question. So you should also know the PSI slots and different standards on motherboard. With minimal performance impact for most gaming scenarios, replacing the motherboard is unnecessary, as the current slot supports the GPU. A user reports that their smartphone cannot connect to the corporate Wi-Fi network, while other devices connect successfully. The technician verifies the SSID and password are correct, and SSID, this is network provider, this is pretty much the network name, passwords are correct, and the phone is within a range. The network uses VPA3 Enterprise with 802.1x authentication. What is the most likely cause of the connection issue? The phone's Wi-Fi antenna is faulty. The phone's firmware is outdated and lacks VPA3 support. The corporate firewall is blocking the phone's MAC address. The network requires a client certificate for authentication. Or the phone is set to use a static IP address. And here the correct answer is that the network requires a client certificate for authentication. As VPA3, latest Wi-Fi encryption standard, enterprise with 802.1x, authentication typically requires a client certificate for secure access. And this is what you should know about VPA3, that it typically requires client certificate. And if the phone lacks this certificate, it cannot authenticate even with correct credentials. A technician is troubleshooting a laptop that fails to charge when plugged in. So, laptop is not charging. The power adapter is confirmed to work with another device. So, power adapter is working and the charging port appears undamaged. The technician suspects an issue with the internal power components. Which steps should the technician take next to diagnose the issue? Replace the battery with a known good one. Check the BIOS settings for power management options. Test the DC in jack for continuity using multimeter. Update the laptop's firmware to the latest version. Run a diagnostic tool to check the charging circuit. And here the correct answer is that technician should test the DC in jack for continuity using multimeter. Since the power adapter works and the charging port appears undamaged, the issue may lie with the DC in jack's connection to the motherboard. Testing for continuity with multimeter verifies if the jack is properly transmitting power, helping identify a faulty connection or components. And yes guys, this is pretty much it for this test. Hope that you found this test useful, and like I mentioned at the start of this video, if you are interested in taking these types of questions for yourself, I have a course with 1200 questions on Udemy. So as you can go here on Skill Test Pro if you want and take different questions for yourself. And I will leave all links in description and in first pinned comment of this video. So yes guys, if you found this useful, leave a like, share this video, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and see you in the next one.